Good morning, and to our friends out west, and good afternoon to everyone. We'll just give just a few more moments here for folks to begin filtering in before we start our market update for today. I'm Jeff Tucker, third generation owner and CEO of Tucker Company. Most of you guys know, I looked at the attendees, and most of you know we're a freight brokerage, oldest privately held freight brokerage in the country. We're just celebrating our 61st year. I see a couple folks on that I've known for 30 years. So that's kind of scary, and you know who you are. For those of you who know, Gene Werdy, our Vice President of Operations for 39 years, just recently retired a couple weeks ago. He was kind of semi-retired. All right, so I'm going to get going. But yeah, Gene was, if you know the phrase WWJD, we had a phrase around here, WWGD, what would Gene do? And taught a lot of folks some of the best transportation thinking and actions in the country. So we're grateful to Gene for all his time, and happy to take any well wishes to Gene to him. So we're going to get going. So where are we? Well, that's a real good question. I think the market has changed a lot since the beginning of the year, so we'll get right into it. Those of you who've been on one of our conferences before, this is a 15-minute conference. It will end at quarter after the hour, and we'll stick around for as many as 15 minutes for questions. I'll ask our team, because I can't see the questions, I'll ask our team to ask me the questions at the end if there are any. So where we are, we're in familiar territory. A lot of folks have been on a lot of different conferences the last few weeks around the country talking about freight transportation. A lot of folks are saying, hey, we reached normal. And my answer to that is absolutely not. There's no such thing as a normal moment in this market. Well, maybe there is, but balanced is what we're talking about. So what I'm just going to touch on right here is this red line every year, and Morgan Stanley has a current year. This is the current year. So you can see here the magenta color is 2018. That was the previous capacity crisis, previous worst capacity crisis, until of course 2020 and 2021 came and blew most of those months away from 2018. You can see 2022 came in like a lion. Most of this demand that you see, this is demand for truckload dry van. There are separate charts for different kinds of freight. Most of this demand relates or correlates most closely to the demand that we see in spot market. It measures overall demand, but spot market will amplify this overall demand. So where I see this is balanced, and I say momentarily because what you can see is the black line. The black line's I don't know if you see my cursor, but the black line has triangles. The black line is an average of 2007 to 2021. And most of those years were the 8 Obama years, the first 2 of the Trump years. That was a 10-year period. That was the nation's longest economic recovery in history. That black line represents, in my understanding, and I think most folks who follow this closely, that black line represents, at least during that period of time, a delicately balanced supply and demand. Not softness for sure as relation to the spikes that we saw, but a delicately balanced equilibrium between supply and demand. And that's kind of right where we are today, just slightly underneath. This is our new normal. And I think, if we can figure this out, and we gain, a strategic advantage on the field of competitors, right? Whether you're a shipper, anyone who's buying freight transportation, you figure this out, that this is your new normal, and a couple other factors that are really critical to your thinking, to your procurement practices. You understand, and what I mean, what is this new normal? every 2 or 3 years, we have a capacity crisis. Why? Once again, we have been delicately balanced. Delicately balanced. Before COVID, a 2.5% GDP for a quarter could kiss us into that area of capacity crisis, right? 3%, oh, Katie, bar the doors. So delicately balanced every 2 to 3 years. So how do you structure? How do you think about that? Well, there's more to the story. I've been talking about this quite frequently, and I believe there's a lot of traction around this today, this thought. But procurement strategy causes, and I'm not picking any one out, but generally speaking, we as Americans, corporate culture, the strategy is flawed when it comes to procuring transportation. And in fact, it causes these capacity crises. So there's a couple things that often happen immediately when a spot market softens. The first is, a lot of the, and this is kind of invisible, and it's something that we all have to think about and realize and maybe do the data and the homework on. But immediately, our freight costs decrease. We don't have to go to bid. We don't have to ask for new prices. Immediately, when we see the prices come down from the highs to that black line of equilibrium, our rates have gone down dramatically, in some cases, double digits percentages. Why is that? For the next piece, FreightWaves has a sonar product. Many of you know, and one of the things FreightWaves does is that it measures tender rejections, tender acceptance, tender rejection. So large shipper offers a load to a broker carrier through its tendering system. That carrier or broker either accepts or denies the load. During the worst of that crisis period, from late 2020 to 21, and even in a little bit of 22, our the national tender rejection was well into the 20 percentiles. In some cases, kissing almost 30%. So, take a thought. That's about 25% roughly for a long period of time of tender rejections. Okay. 1 out of every 4 loads tendered was rejected by the primary provider. So what happens? Well, in a loose market, goes the second one. Maybe the second, company's got a truck in the area. In a tight market, like we saw, it goes right into the spot market. A few exceptions here and there. It goes right into the spot market, and you pay spot prices. Okay. Procurement strategy drives and causes capacity crises. So where are things now? Right now, FreightWaves recently indicated that tender rejections are below 6%, like 5.8%. Remarkable drop. That is a huge savings that we're not quite, I think, as a national buying and procurement thought process. I don't think we're understanding it, but it's happened. And all that's really good stuff, right? So no problems there, right? That's but what comes next is what really sets us up for to repeat our past mistakes. So bid season. Bid season's coming up. It's anywhere from like now until February. And it's, I don't know if everyone calls it that, but we heck do if you're in the buying and selling of transportation. But that's when buyers look to cut their freight costs deeply, and I think oftentimes mistake the spot market for the contract market. And then buyers gravitate toward the largest carriers, and here's the thought process. Oh gosh, I spent so much time in the spot market. I dealt with so many different companies. We got to make sense of this all. We've got to say, okay, let's pick a handful of companies, mostly big carriers, and let's just settle this down. Well, you do that over and over and over again, and you get the same result. And the result is these carriers are not equipped. I'm going to show you the data to demonstrate that. They're not equipped to grow with you. They're not equipped to handle the spikes. In fact, it was with a large carrier's, very large, well-known carrier's operations management last week. And I was told that, when things are slow and they've got an award, they've committed to an award of 2 loads a day, things are slow and a customer needs a couple extra loads, they'll give them those extra loads. But when things heat up in the spot market, all of that quote unquote internal excess capacity is siphoned off and is utilized in the spot market, right? It's why? Because there's a limited time period where that spot market is going to provide a significant ROI for that motor carrier. So, I've known this happens, and I think all of us know this happens. But, to hear a carrier just kind of lay it out, yeah, no, this is what we do, was, one of those another one of those eye-opening moments, and really just kind of confirmed what we already knew to be true. But because spot rates are down, the theory goes, hey, contract rates must be down too, and to some degree that's true. But I think, again, those of us who live in it, buy in it, and sell in it, and as a broker, we live in the margin. We know that these marketplaces are two different marketplaces. There's a commonality, there's a cause and effect, but they are different marketplaces entirely. And here's how. In the 2.5 roughly years since January of 2020, the number of active for hire carriers increased by 114,000 carriers to 361,000 as of last month. 361,816 carriers to be exact. 99.7% of them, about 114,100 carriers to be exact, were growth in trucks of sizes 1 to 100. And talked about this before, that segment, you think, well, maybe the average might be 50 trucks. No, not even close. The average size fleet in truck sizes 1 to 100 trucks is 5.3. Kind of stayed there for a few years. And this one, if you take nothing else from today, this next bullet, it's everything. You hear a lot, we just heard Werner bought Baylor, right? You hear a lot of, big carrier mergers. The big carrier mergers are happening because they can't grow their fleets to meet the demand from the largest shippers. So the only way they can do it is to eat one another, right? For the most part. 54%, more than half of all drivers in the United States who drive semis drive for these 1 to 100 truck fleets, 5.3 average trucks, right? The growth there is extraordinary, and extraordinary meaning roughly a million drivers of the 3.5 million today, a million of them a year ago were not driving for this size fleet, and now they are. You got to understand that if you're thinking, and if you're trying to influence purchasing procurement behavior for the positive, if you're trying to build a reliant, flexible, and fungible supply chain where you're not paying at these peaks, you've got to understand this. Otherwise, you're going in the wrong direction. So to avoid this, you've got to take a balanced approach, and to avoid. And what this is this is from Morgan Stanley, truckstop.com, and Bloomberg. This shows over a period of time. I think we touched on this just earlier, but from 2015, right? So you see the dark blue, purple line is 12-month moving average, dry van rate per mile, right? You want to try to avoid those ups and downs, and I think there's a way to do that, and to build that resilient transportation network. I think, again, because spot rates and contract rates are so different, got to recognize this is from FTR. I asked Avery Weiss for this slide the other day. He was kind enough to give it to me. FTR had their conference a couple of weeks ago in Indianapolis. Great conference to go to if you're into data, like we are. FTR predicted contract rates for 2023 going forward would be a 4.8% decline over behind 2022, after 2022 had an 8.8% year-on-year gain. So again, not the huge precipitous drop you would see in the spot market. But again, contract and spot markets are two different animals tied together by a common theme, but two different animals entirely. So what's your best way to win in this last minute? Is my golden rules here. Reward and prioritize reliable carrier partners who've been proven themselves in and out and who didn't abandon you. We have carriers ourselves, as we tend to deal with middle size, some larger carriers. And we know the ones that are in it with us, and we know the ones that immediately all of a sudden can't find trucks when things get hot. We know where their trucks went. So we try to award capacity to those folks that stick with us. Excuse me. And then the second point, I'm a broker, so it's close to my heart, but you can't argue with the data. You can't argue with the landslide of data that is indicating that you cannot rely on large carriers alone. Not enough of them, not enough drivers. You've got to award brokers, reliable broker partners, excuse me. Excuse me. You got to reward reliable broker partners with volume lanes. 1-2 loads a week, those lanes are fine. I've got a tickle in my throat, sorry. But they've got to be shoulder to shoulder, eyeball to eyeball peers with some of your, your primary large lane providers. Way easier for a broker to go from 2 loads a day to 3 loads a day for the same price if they're sharing a significant volume lane than a carrier, because carriers don't always have that extra equipment available. I'm terribly sorry. But lastly is award all your business based upon performance metrics. And what we're seeing today is, especially if you're shipping into consumer product companies or retail, there's on time and in full. What we're seeing is a lot of our customers are thanking us for our on time performance because it's as high as it is. It's dragging the fulfillment rates higher, or sorry, the combination of on time and in full higher. That's critically important going forward because the retailers are enforcing, excuse me, retailers are enforcing more and more the on time in full, the OTIF compliance fee regime. So you get penalized if you're not delivering on time. So those carriers, those providers who are providing that high performance, got to reward them first because they are the most sought after providers. And if you can keep them close to you, you're all better off for it. So again, I think it all comes down to understanding, how not to fight the waves along the shore and ride it. If you understand where the data is, you understand where the markets are, and what's happening in those markets, you're far better suited. So I'm a couple minutes over. I apologize. If we have any questions, please, if my team could call them out. Otherwise, we're good to go. Any questions, Deanna?
I do not see any questions at this time. If you'd like to enter a question, please put it into the chat.
We'll just give a moment. Appreciate everyone for being here. I think the next date will be December 8th. This will be a little bit after peak. Well, probably during peak. Sorry, excuse me. Hoping to have someone from the outside of Tucker present.